The hardest truths are often hidden beneath the gentlest lies. In the shadow of Norway's towering fjords, where winter winds carry whispers of ancient grudges, the village of Ravenshollow clings to peace like driftwood in a storm. For 7 years, Astrid Ironsdottir has tended wounds and delivered babies, her sword arm softened by years of healing rather than harming. The villagers know her as a widow, a former Shieldmaiden who traded battle for herbs and raised 2 orphaned boys with fierce maternal devotion. But when dragon-proud longships slice through the morning mist, everything changes. Ragnar Bloodaxe steps onto their shores, his presence commanding as thunder, his eyes scanning the crowd until they lock onto 13-year-old twins Eric and Bjorn. In that moment, Astrid's blood turns to ice water. She sees recognition flickering in the chieftain's weathered face, recognition of features that mirror his own bloodline, of a resemblance that could unravel 7 years of carefully woven deception. The boys she's raised, loved and trained in secret are not the plague orphans she's claimed them to be. They carry the blood of Ragnar's greatest enemies, children she should have killed but chose to save instead. Now, as Ragnar demands answers and her sons stand unknowing at the crossroads of their destiny, Astrid must decide, confess her deception and risk everything, or maintain her lie and watch the truth destroy them all anyway. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sound of boots on wet shingle cuts through the morning air like a blade. Astrid forces her breathing to remain steady as Ragnar Bloodaxe approaches, his warriors flanking him in a crescent of scarred leather and iron. The villagers of Ravenshollow press back against their wooden homes, children clutching at their mothers' skirts. But Astrid holds her ground. 7 years of pretending has taught her to mask fear behind calm competence. "Welcome to Ravenshollow," she says, stepping forward with the measured confidence of the village's unofficial leader. Her voice carries the authority she's earned through countless difficult births and plague seasons, though her heart hammers against her ribs. "I am Astrid Ironsdottir, healer to these people." Ragnar's pale eyes sweep over her, taking in the simple woolen dress, the herb-stained hands, the silver-streaked, brown hair braided in the manner of married women. But she sees the moment his gaze catches on the faint scar along her forearm, a warrior's mark that no amount of healing work can fully disguise. "Ironsdottir," he repeats, the name rolling off his tongue like he's tasting it for hidden meanings. "Your father?" "Dead these many years. Lost in a raid on Saxon shores." The lie comes easily. She's told it so often it almost feels like truth. Better to claim a dead stranger than speak her real father's name, a man whose allegiances would raise questions she cannot answer. Behind her, she hears Eric's sharp intake of breath. The boy has always been too clever for his own good, reading tensions in a room like runes carved in stone. Bjorn remains silent, but she knows he's cataloguing every warrior, every weapon, every possible escape route. Her sons, for that's what they are now, regardless of blood, have learned caution in a world where the wrong words can mean death. "My lord seeks tribute from all settlements in these waters," announces the man at Ragnar's right shoulder, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a war chief's herald. "Grain, silver, iron, whatever Ravenshollow can spare to ensure safe passage for your fishing boats." The request isn't unexpected. Every village along the fjords pays such tribute to one chieftain or another. Protection money, dressed in the language of mutual benefit. Astrid has been preparing for this day since she first arrived, storing away a portion of everything the village produced. "Of course," she replies. "Though we are simple folk here, our wealth lies in our fish and our grain stores, not silver hoards." But Ragnar isn't listening to talk of tribute. His attention has shifted again to Eric and Bjorn, studying their faces with the intensity of a man reading battle formations. Astrid's throat tightens. The boys have grown so much this past year, their childish features sharpening into the strong bones and proud bearing of their bloodline, features that echo in the face of the man before her. "Fine boys," Ragnar says, his tone deceptively casual. "Your sons? Adopted. Astrid answers quickly. Their parents died of plague in a village upriver. I brought them here as babes. The lie tastes like ash, but it's the story every person in Ravenshollow knows. She's told it at every harvest feast, every winter gathering, weaving it so deeply into the village's memory that even she sometimes forgets the truth beneath. Eric shifts restlessly beside her, and she catches his movement with a subtle hand on his shoulder. The boy has his birth father's restless energy, the same need to act when words grow heavy with unspoken meanings. It's a trait that once made his bloodline powerful and ultimately led to their destruction. Plague orphans, Ragnar muses. How fortunate they found such a devoted mother. There's something in his voice that makes Astrid's skin crawl, not suspicion exactly, but a hunter's patience. The way a man watches deer before deciding which one to bring down. Children are precious in a small village, she says. Every hand will matter when they're grown. Indeed. Ragnar steps closer, close enough that she can smell the sea salt in his beard, the leather and iron scent of a man who lives for war. Tell me, healer, do you ever find them difficult to manage? Boys of that blood often run hot. The words hit like a physical blow. That blood, he knows, or suspects, or is testing her with the cruelest precision. No more than any boys their age, she manages. They're good children, helpful. I'm sure they are. Ragnar's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Perhaps they'd like to see my ships? Boys that age are always fascinated by dragon heads and painted shields. It's not a request. Behind him, his warriors shift position with practiced ease, cutting off potential retreat routes without appearing to threaten. Astrid realizes with cold certainty that this is no random tribute collection. Ragnar Bloodaxe has come to Ravenshollow for a reason. And that reason is standing beside her, amber eyes bright with curiosity and completely unaware that their past has just walked out of the morning mist to claim them. Every muscle in Astrid's body screams at her to refuse, to grab the boys and run for the forest paths she's memorized during 7 years of careful preparation. But she forces herself to smile, to play the role of a simple village healer honored by a great chieftain's attention. They would be thrilled, she says, placing protective hands on both boys' shoulders. Though I should accompany them, they can be over-eager around warriors and their tales, of course. Ragnar's agreement comes too easily, a mother's watchful eye. As they walk toward the harbor, Astrid's mind races through the fragments of the life she's built here. 7 years of morning rounds to check on pregnant women and feverish children. 7 years of teaching Eric and Bjorn to fish the deep waters where the current runs cold and true. 7 years of quiet evenings by her hearth, watching the boys practice their letters on bark tablets while she mended fishing nets and pretended their biggest worry was whether the autumn harvest would last through winter. The routine has become sacred to her, rising before dawn to check her drying herbs, preparing tonics for old Magnus's aching joints, delivering babies into the world with hands that once wielded a blade with deadly precision. She's delivered most of the village's youngest children, watched them take their first steps, soothed their childhood fears with honey cakes and gentle stories. These people trust her not just with their bodies, but with their secrets, their hopes, their whispered confessions in the dark hours before death. And the boys, gods, the boys have become everything to her. Eric, with his quick mind and quicker temper, always the first to leap to someone's defense but equally quick to question authority when it seems unjust. Bjorn, steadier but no less fierce, who thinks 3 moves ahead in every situation and has never forgotten a slight against someone he cares for. She's taught them to read the sky for weather, to read people for truth, to read the forest for danger. What she hasn't taught them is who they really are. They walk past Inga's house, where the old woman sits spinning wool and pretending not to stare. Inga, who helped deliver them when Astrid first arrived, claiming they were plague orphans she'd rescued. Inga, who never asked why babies from a plague village looked so healthy, or why their adopted mother sometimes woke screaming from dreams she wouldn't name. Past Gunner's smithy, where 13-year-old Eric has spent countless hours learning to work iron. The boy has strong hands and an instinctive feel for the forge's rhythm, too instinctive perhaps. The ease with which he shapes weapons rather than tools sometimes makes Astrid's blood run cold with recognition. Past the meeting hall where she's arbitrated disputes, her voice carrying weight because people have learned to trust her judgment, where she's told stories on winter nights while snow piled against the walls, carefully chosen stories that never mention certain clans or certain wars or certain choices that haunt her sleep. Ragnar's warriors fan out as they approach the harbour, their casual positioning putting them between the boys and any escape route back to the village. Professional work, the kind of tactical thinking that speaks of long experience in taking things that don't want to be taken. Magnificent ships, Astrid observes, though her throat feels tight, and they are long, sleek dragons of wood and iron, built for speed and terror, the kind of ships that can appear out of morning mist and disappear again before anyone realizes what's been lost. Eric steps forward eagerly, drawn despite her restraining hand. I've never seen carvings like those. The detail on the dragon heads. My shipwrights are artists as well as craftsmen, Ragnar replies, his attention fixed on Eric's face. Tell me, boy, what do you see when you look at those prows? There's a test in the question. Astrid recognizes it with the part of her mind that still thinks like a warrior. The wrong answer could confirm suspicions that would destroy everything she's built. But Eric, 13 and eager to impress, doesn't sense the danger. Strength, he says immediately. And purpose. Like they know where they're going and nothing will stop them from getting there. Ragnar's smile is sharp as a blade. Excellent. And you? He turns to Bjorn. Bjorn, more cautious by nature, takes longer to answer. They're beautiful, he says finally, but they're meant to frighten people. The dragons aren't just decoration, they're warnings. Wise. Ragnar nods approvingly. Very wise indeed. Astrid watches this exchange with growing dread. The boys are responding exactly as their bloodline would dictate, Eric with passionate directness, Bjorn with careful analysis. Every word they speak, every gesture they make, is confirmation of what she's spent 7 years trying to hide. Perhaps, Ragnar continues, his tone still conversational, you'd like to see the inside of a dragon ship. I could use young men with such perceptive eyes. The invitation hangs in the salt air like a trap waiting to spring. Around them, Ragnar's warriors watch with the patient attention of wolves who know the deer cannot run forever. That's very generous, Astrid says carefully. Her healer's voice steady even as her warrior's instincts scream warnings. But the boys have duties in the village. Nets to mend, grain to... Mother. Eric's voice cuts across her words, bright with excitement and something else, a hunger she recognizes with cold dread. Could we, just for a moment? The eagerness in his tone makes her stomach clench. It's the same tone his birth father used when speaking of raids, of glory, of the sea calling to men who belonged on its waves. Blood will tell, the old saying goes, and she's watching it happen before her eyes. Bjorn remains silent, but she sees his amber eyes measuring the ships with tactical precision. At 13, he already thinks like a strategist, weighing advantages and weaknesses with an intelligence that would have made him valuable in any war council, another echo of bloodline she cannot deny. The village work will wait, Ragnar says smoothly. Surely the boys deserve to see how real warriors live. Real warriors. The words hit Astrid like a physical blow because she recognizes the test embedded within them. Ragnar isn't just inviting the boys aboard his ship, he's measuring their reactions to everything he says, cataloguing responses like a hunter studying tracks. Of course, she hears herself say, though every instinct screams against it, a brief visit would be educational. As they approach the largest dragon ship, Astrid notices details that make her throat tighten. Fresh repairs to the hull that speak of recent battles, weapons stacked with the casual efficiency of men who expect to use them soon. This isn't a peaceful tribute collection. This is a warband making preparations. The gangplank creaks under their weight as they board. Eric's sharp intake of breath echoes across the deck as he takes in the organized chaos of a warrior's ship. Shields line the rails in precise rows, each one painted with symbols that tell stories of victories and vengeance. Coils of rope lie ready for quick deployment. Barrels of provisions stack in configurations that allow for rapid access during battle. "How many men?" Bjorn asks quietly, his gaze moving over the rowing benches with mathematical precision. 42, Ragnar answers immediately. "Though this is only one of my fleet. Tell me, boy, why does that number matter?" Bjorn's pause is barely perceptible, but Astrid catches it, the moment when her careful training wars with inherited instinct. "Coordination," he says finally. "Too few men, and you can't maintain speed in heavy seas. Too many, and you sacrifice maneuverability." Excellent reasoning. Ragnar's approval carries an undertone that makes Astrid's skin crawl. "You think like someone born to command ships." The casual observation drops into the salt air like a stone into still water. Around them, Ragnar's warriors have positioned themselves with subtle precision, blocking the gangplank, controlling the deck space, creating a cage that doesn't look like one. Eric moves toward the dragon-head prow, running his fingers along the carved scales with reverence that speaks of recognition deeper than admiration. The craftsmanship is incredible. Each scale is individual, but they flow together like... He struggles for words, then settles on truth that cuts too close to bone, like they're alive, like the dragon is just sleeping, waiting to wake up and fly. Or swim, Ragnar suggests quietly. Dragons are creatures of many elements: sea, sky, fire. His pale eyes find Astrid's face. Blood. The word hangs between them with the weight of accusation and promise. Astrid feels the moment crystallizing around her, like ice forming on winter water. 7 years of careful lies, of constructed safety, of pretending the past could stay buried, all of it balanced on the edge of Ragnar's next words. "My lord," one of his warriors calls from the stern, "the tide is turning. It's not weather observation. It's a signal." Astrid recognizes it with the part of her mind that still thinks in terms of tactics and timing. Whatever Ragnar came to Ravenshallow to accomplish, this moment is when it begins. Indeed. Ragnar steps closer to the boys, his massive presence casting shadows across their faces. "Tell me, Eric Bjorn, do you ever dream of something more than village life? Of purposes larger than fishing nets and grain stores?" Eric's response comes too quickly, too eagerly. "Sometimes I dream about sailing to places I've never seen, fighting battles that matter." "Fighting battles," Ragnar repeats softly. "Your adopted mother has taught you well about weapons, I assume. Village boys should know how to defend themselves." The question is a trap wrapped in reasonable concern. Astrid opens her mouth to deflect, to lie, to protect, but Bjorn's answer cuts across her intentions. "She's taught us what we need to know." Simple words, but delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly how dangerous he could be if circumstances required it. The way he stands, the set of his shoulders, the unconscious hand positioning, everything about Bjorn suddenly screams of warrior training that goes far beyond village self-defense. Ragnar smiles, and Astrid knows with crushing certainty that her time for choosing has arrived. The smile on Ragnar's face is a predator's expression, patient, knowing, inevitable. Astrid feels the world narrow to this single moment on the deck of a dragon ship, salt spray misting around them, while her carefully constructed life crumbles like old parchment. The thought hammers against her skull with desperate urgency. Grab the boys and run now, before it's too late. But even as the impulse screams through her warrior's instincts, she knows the futility of it. Ragnar's men control the gangplank, the harbor, probably the village itself by now. She's walked into a trap with her eyes open, led by maternal pride and the terrible miscalculation that 7 years might be enough time for the past to forget them. "What we need to know," Ragnar muses, still focused on Bjorn's words. "That's an interesting phrase. It suggests knowledge held in reserve, doesn't it? Training that goes deeper than necessity. Astrid's mouth feels full of ash. Every careful lesson she's given the boys. How to read an opponent's stance, how to move silently through forest undergrowth, how to kill quickly and efficiently when cornered. All of it shows in their bearing now. She's tried so hard to give them the tools to survive, and in doing so, she's made them unmistakable. All village children learn basic defense, she manages, but her voice sounds hollow even to her own ears. The fjords can be dangerous. Indeed, they can. Ragnar's attention shifts to Eric, who still stands transfixed by the dragon carving. What do you see in those eyes, boy? The dragon's eyes? Eric peers closer, his young face intent with concentration. The carved amber stones that form the creature's gaze catch the morning light, seeming to glow within a fire. They look familiar, he says slowly, confusion creeping into his tone. Like I've seen them before, but that's impossible. No. The word tears through Astrid's chest like a blade, not confusion, recognition. The amber eyes that mark his bloodline, carved into 100 dragon ships, stamped into memory by generations of warriors who bore the same distinctive gaze. Her boys carry their heritage in their very faces, and she spent 7 years pretending no one would ever notice. Perhaps not so impossible, Ragnar suggests gently. Blood remembers what the mind forgets, old connections that run deeper than memory. Bjorn's head snaps up, his tactical mind clearly working through implications. What do you mean? The question hangs in the air like a sword suspended by threads. Astrid sees the moment approaching, the revelation that will shatter everything, destroy the safe haven she's built, expose the boys to dangers that kept her awake through 7 years of nightmares. Tell them. The thought rises unbidden from some deep place in her soul. Tell them now before he does. Let them hear it from you. But the words stick in her throat like fish bones. How does she explain that their entire lives are built on lies? That the parents they've mourned never existed? That their true father was a war chief whose death she helped orchestrate, whose sons she stole from a burning hall while their clan's blood still steamed in the winter air? Mother? Eric's voice cuts through her spiraling thoughts. What does he mean? She looks at her boys, regardless of blood or birth, and sees the trust in their faces beginning to crack. They're starting to understand that adult conversations are happening around them, that meanings flow beneath surface words like dangerous currents. There are many connections in these waters, she says carefully. Many families scattered by war and time. Sometimes resemblances appear where we least expect them. It's not quite a lie, but it's not truth either. Cowardice dressed in careful words. She watches Ragnar's expression shift to something that might be disappointment, and realizes with cold dread that he's been offering her chances to speak honestly, testing whether she'll trust him with truth before he takes it by force. War and time, he repeats. Yes, they scatter many things, sons from fathers, truth from memory. His pale gaze finds hers with uncomfortable directness, sometimes even the living from their own names. The words hit like hammer blows. He knows, not just suspects, knows. Somehow, impossibly, Ragnar Bloodaxe has identified 2 boys hidden in a remote fjord village, seen through 7 years of careful deception to the bloodline beneath. Eric moves closer to Bjorn, the brothers unconsciously presenting a united front as tensions thicken around them. It's a warrior's response, inherited from generations who faced danger together. Another confirmation of everything Astrid has tried to hide. Perhaps, Ragnar continues conversationally, we should discuss tribute in private, away from young ears that might be troubled by certain revelations. The offer is a lifeline and a threat wrapped together. A final chance to control how much truth emerges and when and in what words. But accepting means leaving the boys surrounded by his warriors, vulnerable to questions she can't answer for them. The boys should return to the village, she says, her voice steadier than she feels. Their absence will be noticed. Will it? Ragnar's smile returns, sharp as winter wind. How interesting that you think anyone in Ravenshollow would dare question my hospitality. The words settle over them like a shroud, confirming what Astrid has known since the moment Ragnar's ships appeared on the horizon. There is no escape from this. The village, her sanctuary, the life she's built, all of it exists now only at his sufferance. She feels the deck shift beneath her feet, though whether from tide or the weight of inevitability, she cannot say. "The boys stay with me," she says, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. 7 years of healing hands and gentle words, but the Shieldmaiden's core remains unbroken. Whatever you have to say, they'll hear it from my lips, not yours. Ragnar studies her for a long moment, and she sees something shift in his pale eyes. Perhaps approval, perhaps calculation, as you wish. But understand, Astrid Ironsdottir, that speaking truth aloud changes everything. There will be no returning to yesterday's lies once these words are spoken. The use of her true name hits like a physical blow, not just the healer Astrid, not the careful fiction she's maintained, but her full warrior name spoken before her sons. She watches Eric and Bjorn exchange glances, sees the questions multiply behind their amber eyes. "Ironsdottir," Bjorn repeats slowly, "but your name is a lie." The word tears from her throat with the force of a confession 7 years in the making. "One of many I've told to keep you both alive." The deck seems to tilt beneath them all. Eric's face goes pale, while Bjorn's expression hardens with the terrible understanding that everything familiar is about to crumble. They're still children in so many ways, but the warrior blood in their veins recognizes the moment when childhood ends forever. "Who are we?" Eric's voice cracks on the question. "Our parents, the plague village, was any of it real?" Astrid feels herself standing at the edge of an abyss. Below lies truth, jagged and unforgiving. Behind lies the pretense that has sustained them all. But Ragnar's presence makes retreat impossible, and she realizes with crystalline clarity that this moment has been approaching since the day she pulled 2 screaming infants from their burning hall. "Your parents are dead," she says, each word cutting like broken glass. "But not from plague, from war, from choices I made." She draws a shuddering breath. "From my blade when loyalty demanded it." The silence stretches between them like a chasm. Ragnar's warriors watch with professional interest, but even they seem to sense the magnitude of what's being destroyed and reborn on this deck. "You killed our parents." Bjorn's voice carries no emotion, which somehow makes it more terrible than Eric's strangled gasp. "I helped end a war," Astrid whispers, "a blood feud that would have consumed every soul within 100 leagues. Your father, your true father, would have burned the world to feed his ambition. So we stopped him." "We?" Ragnar's voice cuts through her confession with surgical precision. "The Alliance, your father's enemies, everyone who understood that some prices are too high to pay." She looks at her boys, not her boys, never her boys, and feels her heart break completely. "I was supposed to ensure no witnesses remained, no heirs to carry forward the bloodline, no sons to seek revenge." Eric's face twists with betrayal and rage. "But you didn't. You saved us instead." "I damned us all," she corrects. "The moment I pulled you from that burning hall, I chose love over duty, maternal instinct over warrior oath." Her voice strengthens, finding solid ground in absolute truth. "And I would make the same choice again, knowing what it costs." The transformation happens before her eyes. The boys she's raised, loved, protected, they're disappearing, replaced by young men who carry their father's blood and their grandfather's rage. The careful balance she's maintained between sheltering them and training them to survive crumbles like sand. "Who were we?" Bjorn demands. "What name did you steal from us?" Ragnar steps forward, his massive presence suddenly protective rather than threatening. "You were Eriksson and Bjornsson of the White Wolf clan, sons of Fenrir the Bloodthirsty, grandsons of Grimvar Iron Fist." His voice carries the weight of formal pronouncement. last heirs of a bloodline that traces back 7 generations of sea kings. The names hit like physical blows. Astrid watches her boys. Their names, even their names were lies, absorb the magnitude of their stolen heritage. Princes raised as peasants, heirs to a legacy of violence and glory, taught to mend nets and grind grain. And now, Eric's voice has changed, carrying new harmonics of authority and danger. Now, Ragnar says quietly, you choose who you become. The village boys who never existed, or the wolf princes you were born to be. Astrid knows she's lost them. In the space of heartbeats, 7 years of careful construction has collapsed into rubble. The boys look at her now with strangers' eyes, seeing not their devoted mother, but the warrior who destroyed their world to save their lives. The threshold stretches before them all, past and future, truth and consequence, love and duty. And there is no path back to yesterday's peace. The silence that follows weighs heavier than chainmail. Astrid watches the last remnants of childhood drain from her sons' faces, not her sons', never truly hers, as they absorb the full magnitude of their stolen birthright. 7 years of love condensed into this single moment of reckoning, and she can see in their amber eyes that everything has changed irrevocably. Eric turns first, his young face a mask of bewildered fury. Wolf princes, he repeats, testing the words like a blade's edge. All this time we could have been dead, Astrid finishes quietly. You would have been dead before your first winter. Every surviving ally of your father's enemies would have hunted you to the ends of the earth. But alive as ourselves, Bjorn counters, his voice carrying new authority that makes her chest tighten, not shadows hiding behind false names. Ragnar observes their exchange with calculating interest, and Astrid recognizes the look. She's seen it in the eyes of Jarl's advisors weighing the value of potential alliances. Whatever game he's playing extends far beyond simple truth-telling. The dead can afford pride, she says. The living must choose survival. Must they? Ragnar's interruption cuts across the growing tension between mother and sons. Tell me, boys, Erik, Bjorn, what do you know of your grandfather's legacy? The casual use of their true names sends visible shocks through both young men. Astrid sees them straighten, shoulders squaring with inherited nobility that no amount of village life could fully suppress. Nothing, Erik admits, but his eyes burn with sudden hunger for knowledge. She told us nothing of our blood. To protect you, Astrid protests. But her words feel hollow against the weight of their accusation. Or to keep us weak, Bjorn suggests, and the coldness in his tone cuts deeper than any blade, easier to control peasants than princes. Your grandfather, Ragnar continues, as if she hasn't spoken, commanded the largest fleet in northern waters. Grimvar Ironfist held sway from the Orkney Islands to the White Sea. His dragon ships carried fire and glory to distant shores. Astrid watches her sons drink in these revelations like men dying of thirst. Each word awakens something in their bearing: pride, ambition, the dangerous magnetism of inherited power. He was also brutal beyond measure, she interjects desperately. His warriors painted their shields with enemy blood. Children fled at the sound of his war horns. The strong prey upon the weak, Ragnar observes mildly. It is the natural order. The natural order breeds endless cycles of vengeance, she counters. Your father's war would have consumed every settlement from here to the Baltic. How many innocents died because powerful men couldn't contain their pride? Erik moves closer to Ragnar, drawn by some invisible current. What happened to our grandfather's fleet? His holdings? Scattered to the winds when the alliance moved against your father. Some ships serve new masters, others rest on the ocean floor. Ragnar's pale gaze finds Astrid's face, but the bloodline remains. 2 young wolves raised in secret, trained by the very woman who helped destroy their heritage. The irony hangs between them like a sword. Every lesson she's given them in weapons craft, every tactical principle she's shared, every warrior instinct she's carefully nurtured, all of it preparation for a destiny she's spent 7 years trying to deny. You trained us to be what we truly are, Bjorn realizes, his voice carrying new understanding, even while lying about everything else. I trained you to survive, she corrects, but the distinction feels meaningless now. Ragnar steps forward, his massive presence commanding the deck's attention. Survival requires more than skill with weapons, young princes. It demands allies, resources, purpose beyond mere existence. Here it comes. Astrid feels the trap closing around them all, recognizes the moment when casual conversation transforms into formal negotiation. Whatever Ragnar wants from this encounter, whatever brought him to their remote village, the endgame begins now. What do you want from us? Eirik asks directly, and Astrid hears echoes of his grandfather's voice, command expecting immediate response. The question, Ragnar says with satisfaction, is what you want from me. I offer you a choice that your guardian has spent 7 years ensuring you could never make. Astrid's blood turns to ice water. She knows what's coming, can see the shape of it in Ragnar's stance, in the positioning of his warriors, in the hungry gleam that lights her sons' faces. Choose your path forward, Ragnar continues. Return to village obscurity with your adopted mother, living forever as shadows of men who never existed, or claim your birthright. Sail with me. Learn what it means to be princes of the White Wolf clan. The offer splits the air like lightning, illuminating terrible possibilities. Astrid sees the future crystallizing before her eyes, her boys seduced by promises of glory, drawn into the same cycles of violence that destroyed their birth family. But when she looks at their faces, she realizes the choice was never truly hers to make. The hunger in their eyes tells Astrid everything she needs to know. 7 years of careful protection, of village life designed to keep them safe and small, crumbles beneath the weight of a birthright they never knew they possessed. Eirik and Bjorn, she struggles even to think their true names, stand transformed on Ragnar's deck, no longer her boys but young wolves scenting blood on the wind. We need time to consider, she says quickly, stepping between Ragnar and the twins. This is not a choice to make in haste. Time? Ragnar's laugh carries the bite of winter's storms. Time is precisely what you've stolen from them. 7 years of denying their true nature, their rightful place in the world. His pale gaze shifts to the boys. How much more time would you have them waste playing at being farmers? I wasn't playing, Bjorn says quietly, his voice carrying new steel. I was being denied. The words hit Astrid like physical blows. She sees the accusation building in their amber eyes, the terrible understanding that every gentle correction, every redirection away from violence, every insistence on healing over harming was another link in chains they never knew they wore. I kept you alive, she whispers. You kept us hidden, Eirik counters. There's a difference. Ragnar nods approvingly at the distinction. Your sons understand the fundamental truth, Shieldmaiden. A wolf raised as a sheep is still a wolf, but one that has forgotten how to hunt. The calculated cruelty of the observation makes Astrid's hands clench into fists. She recognizes the manipulation at work, the careful way Ragnar feeds their nascent resentment while positioning himself as the liberator of their true selves. It's masterfully done, and all the more dangerous for being built on kernels of truth. Show them, she says suddenly, surprising herself with the challenge. Show them what their birthright truly means. Tell them about the screaming in Skargem when your alliance burned their grandfather's hall. Describe the look in their father's eyes when he realized his infant sons had vanished into smoke and flame. Ragnar's expression doesn't change, but several of his warriors shift uncomfortably. Good. Let them remember the reality behind their glorious rhetoric. War is ugly, he acknowledges, but it is also inevitable. The strong take what they will, the weak suffer what they must. Your boys, your princes, have the blood of sea kings in their veins. Would you have them spend their lives mending nets while lesser men claim the glory that should be theirs? I would have them choose their own path, Astrid says, though she can already see that path crystallizing before her. free from the weight of ancestral feuds and inherited hatred. Freedom? Bjorn's voice cuts across her words like a blade. What freedom have we had? You chose our names, our lives, our ignorance of everything we truly are. He steps closer to Ragnar, and Astrid's heart breaks at the eagerness in his bearing. At least now we're being offered a choice between truth and comfortable lies, Eirik adds, his young face hard with newfound purpose. Astrid feels the deck tilting beneath her, not from the tide, but from the weight of inevitability. She's spent 7 years building a careful balance between sheltering them and preparing them for danger. Now that balance collapses into chaos, revealing the fundamental contradiction at its heart. She trained them to be warriors while praying they would never need to fight. If you go with him, she says quietly, there will be no coming back. Once you claim the name of White Wolf Princes, every enemy your family ever made will rise to meet you. Every alliance your father broke will demand blood payment. Then we'll be ready for them, Eirik says with calm certainty that chills her soul. Will you? You're 13 years old, children playing at warrior games. Children with royal blood and 7 years of the finest tactical training, Ragnar observes. Training provided, ironically, by one of the deadliest Shieldmaidens ever to sail these waters. His smile holds sharp edges. Did you think your reputation was forgotten, Astrid Ironsdottir? That no one would remember the woman who could read a battle's flow like runes carved in stone? The praise feels like mockery. Everything she taught them, every lesson in weaponcraft, every principle of strategy, every instinct for survival, becomes evidence against her now. She created the very instruments of their destruction while believing she was protecting them. Mother. Bjorn's voice carries new formality, new distance. Did you ever intend to tell us the truth? The question hangs in the salt air like a blade suspended by threads. Around them, Ragnar's warriors watch with professional interest, while the morning sun climbs higher, burning away the last traces of peaceful yesterday. I intended to keep you safe, she whispers. That's not the same thing, Eirik points out with devastating accuracy. The trap closes completely. 7 years of love and lies, of careful construction and desperate protection, reduced to this moment of absolute choice. Astrid looks at her sons and sees strangers wearing familiar faces, princes awakening from peasant dreams. The approach becomes inevitable. Ragnar raises his hand, and the subtle gesture transforms the entire encounter. What had been conversation becomes ceremony. His warriors shift into formal positions around the deck's perimeter, their movements precise and ritualistic. Astrid recognizes the signs. She's witnessing something ancient and binding, a moment that will reshape everything that follows. By the old laws, Ragnar's voice carries across the water with ceremonial weight. I formally recognize Eirik Fenrisson and Bjorn Fenrisson, true heirs of the White Wolf bloodline, rightful princes of the northern seas. The words hit the air like hammer strikes on an anvil, each syllable forging chains of obligation and destiny. Astrid feels the last of her protective lies crumble as her sons, no longer hers, perhaps never truly hers, straighten under the weight of their acknowledged heritage. I didn't teach you for this, she says desperately, her voice barely carrying over the lap of waves against the hull. Every lesson, every skill I shared, it was meant to keep you alive, not to prepare you for war. But that's exactly what you did, Eirik replies, his amber eyes holding new depths she doesn't recognize. Every tactical principle, every weapon technique, every instinct for reading an enemy's intentions. He pauses, studying her face with disturbing intensity. You trained us to be exactly what we were born to be. The truth of it cuts deeper than any blade. 7 years of careful balance, teaching them enough to survive while hoping they would never need to fight, collapses into the stark reality of what she's actually accomplished. She created warriors while telling herself she was raising healers. Your instruction was thorough, Ragnar observes, his pale gaze shifting between the twins. Show me. Before Astrid can object, he draws his sax and tosses it toward Bjorn. The blade spins through the morning air, steel catching sunlight, and Astrid watches in horror as her son, not her son, catches it without hesitation. His grip falls naturally into proper position, weight balanced, edge angled for maximum effectiveness. 7 years of village life, Ragnar muses, and his hands remember nobility. Muscle memory, Astrid whispers, recognizing the devastating irony. Every careful lesson in blade work, justified as necessary for hunting and protection, revealed now as preparation for exactly this moment. Eirik steps forward, extending his palm. My turn. The casual confidence in his voice sends ice through Astrid's veins. She watches Bjorn flip the sacks and offer it hilt first to his brother, twin, partner, fellow prince. The exchange flows with practiced ease, evidence of countless hours spent training together while she told herself they were just playing. Remarkable, Ragnar murmurs. Most 13-year-olds would have dropped that blade or cut themselves. Your boys handle weapons like they were born with steel in their hands. They were, Astrid admits, the words torn from her throat. Royal blood carries warrior instincts. I thought, hoped, village life would suppress them. Instincts like theirs cannot be suppressed, one of Ragnar's warriors observes, only redirected. The man's words illuminate the terrible scope of her failure. Every attempt to channel their natural aggression into productive pursuits, every redirection toward healing and building instead of fighting and destroying, all of it merely refined their inherent capabilities while giving them patience and discipline most young warriors lack. We always knew something was missing, Bjorn says quietly, testing the Sax's balance with movements that speak of innate understanding. Every time you corrected our stance, every time you showed us proper grip or footwork, it felt like remembering. Genetic memory. Ragnar nods approvingly. The blood remembers what the mind forgets. Your father was the finest swordsman of his generation. Your grandfather could split an enemy's skull from horseback at full gallop. Astrid watches her sons absorb these details with hungry fascination, sees the way their posture shifts subtly toward pride and anticipation. The boys who helped her gather herbs and tend wounded villagers are disappearing, replaced by young men who suddenly understand why weapons felt natural in their hands. What do you want from us? Eirik asks directly, offering the sacks back to Ragnar hilt first. Nothing you shouldn't freely give, Ragnar replies, but his slight smile suggests otherwise. I want you to choose your future with full knowledge of what you are. Come with me. Learn what it means to be princes. Discover the power that flows in your veins. And then? Bjorn presses. And then you decide whether to reclaim your grandfather's legacy or forge your own path. But you make that choice as yourselves, not as the shadows she tried to shape you into. The words strike home with devastating accuracy. Astrid feels the accusation settle around her like a burial shroud, recognizes the truth she's spent 7 years avoiding. In trying to protect them from their heritage, she denied them the right to choose their own destiny. If we go, Eirik says carefully, what happens to her? The question hangs in the salt air like a sword poised to fall. Astrid realizes that her fate now rests entirely in the hands of the boys she raised, the princes she tried to deny, the young men she both saved and doomed with her desperate love. Ragnar's pause stretches like a bowstring drawn to breaking. When he finally speaks, his words carry the weight of pronouncement. That depends entirely on what truths emerge from this conversation. The threat hangs unspoken but unmistakable. Astrid feels the deck shift beneath her feet, not from tide but from the sudden understanding that her carefully maintained balance between protector and deceiver has finally collapsed. 7 years of walking the knife's edge between love and lies, and now the blade turns inward. What truths? Eirik asks, though his amber eyes suggest he already suspects. Ragnar circles them slowly, a predator savoring the moment before the kill. Your mother, your guardian, has been remarkably selective with her revelations. She told you about your royal blood, your father's death, your grandfather's legacy. but she's been silent about her own role in your family's destruction. Astrid's heart stops. The words she's dreaded for 7 years hang in the air like an executioner's axe. She sees confusion flicker across the twins' faces, watches as Ragnar's implication begins to take root in minds she trained to think tactically. What role? Bjorn's voice carries new wariness, a tone that cuts Astrid deeper than any blade. Tell them, Shieldmaiden. Ragnar's smile holds no warmth. Tell your adopted sons how their beloved protector came to be perfectly positioned to rescue 2 infant princes from a burning hall. Explain the remarkable coincidence that placed Astrid Ironsdottir in Skargem on the very night of the Alliance's assault. The silence that follows feels like drowning. Astrid watches her sons, not her sons, never her sons, process the implications. She sees the moment understanding dawns in their eyes, sees love transform into something colder and infinitely more dangerous. You were there, Eirik says quietly. Not a question. You were part of it, Bjorn adds, his grip tightening on the sacks he still holds. I saved you, Astrid whispers, but the words sound hollow even to her own ears. After helping to destroy everything else, Ragnar's voice carries satisfied cruelty. Astrid Ironsdottir, the Iron Maiden, deadliest shield maiden in the northern seas. Strategic genius who helped plan the assault that ended the White Wolf bloodline forever. He pauses, letting the revelation settle like poison, almost forever. The betrayal in their faces destroys her more completely than any physical wound. 7 years of bedtime stories and healed scrapes, of patient instruction and fierce protection, crumble beneath the weight of this single truth. She watches them see her clearly for the first time, not as their savior, but as their family's destroyer. How many died because of you? Eirik's voice carries ice that would shame winter's storms. Everyone, she admits, because lies no longer serve any purpose. Your grandfather's entire household, 300 warriors, servants, crafters, children. She meets their accusing gazes without flinching. Everyone except you. Why? Bjorn's question emerges as barely more than breath. Why save us? The answer tears itself from her throat like a living thing. Because you were innocent. Because the cycle of vengeance had to end somewhere. Because... Her voice breaks. Because you were beautiful and helpless and perfect, and I couldn't bear to let you burn with the rest. Sentiment, Ragnar observes with disgust. Weakness that undermined everything the Alliance sought to accomplish. Every enemy your bloodline will now create, every death that follows your eventual return to power, all of it traces back to one woman's moment of misplaced compassion. The twins exchange glances loaded with communication she can no longer read. 7 years of shared understanding evaporates as they process the magnitude of her deception. Every embrace, every gentle correction, every proud smile when they mastered a new skill, all of it built on the foundation of their family's massacre. Did you ever love us? Eirik asks, and the question destroys what remains of her heart. More than my own life, she whispers, more than honor or loyalty or any oath I ever swore. That's why you lied to us every day for 7 years, Bjorn interrupts. His young face holds expressions no 13-year-old should possess. Rage and betrayal and a cold calculation that mirrors his grandfather's legendary ruthlessness. Every story, every lesson, every moment of pretended affection. Built on lies. Not pretended, she protests desperately. Never pretended. Everything I felt for you, every moment of joy and pride and fierce protection, that was real, that was true. Truth? Ragnar laughs, the sound sharp as breaking glass. What would you know of truth, child stealer? You built their entire existence on foundations of deception. Astrid feels the final trap closing around her. The boys she raised, trained and loved beyond reason, stand before her transformed. No longer her sons, but young wolves awakening to their true nature. Princes discovering not just their heritage, but the identity of their family's greatest enemy. In Eirik's amber eyes, she sees the cold calculation of inherited nobility. In Bjorn's stance, she recognizes the predatory patience of born warriors. The children who helped her gather herbs are gone forever, replaced by something far more dangerous. She has lost them completely, and worse, she has created her own judgment. The silence stretches between them like a chasm opening in the earth itself. Astrid watches her sons, former sons, process the full weight of revelation, and in their transformed faces, she finally sees herself clearly for the first time in 7 years. She is not their savior. She never was. The realization crashes through her with devastating clarity. Every gentle touch, every patient lesson, every fierce moment of protection, all of it built on the lie that love could somehow balance the scales of genocide. That maternal devotion could absolve her of orchestrating the slaughter of their entire bloodline. "You knew this day would come," she whispers, the words meant for herself but carried away by the salt wind. "You always knew." Bjorn tilts his head, studying her with eyes that hold depths no child should possess. "What did you say?" But Astrid is no longer speaking to him. She's speaking to the woman she was 7 years ago, the strategic genius who helped plan the perfect assault on Skarjem. That woman, the Iron Maiden, Ragnar's brilliant lieutenant, would never have acted from pure sentiment. Every decision carried layers of calculation, contingencies built upon contingencies. "You planned for this moment," she continues, her voice gaining strength as understanding unfolds. "Even as you pulled them from the flames, you knew." "Mother?" Eric's voice carries confusion, but Astrid barely hears him. The tactical mind that made her legendary finally turns its full attention inward, analyzing the pattern of her own choices with ruthless clarity. Why did she settle in Ravenshollow specifically? A remote fjord settlement, yes, but one with strategic value, defensible position, multiple escape routes, close enough to trade lanes for information, but isolated enough to avoid scrutiny. Why did she choose healing as their cover? Not just for the disguise, but because healers learn anatomy, pressure points, the precise application of force needed to kill or incapacitate. Every bandage she taught them to wrap, every herb she showed them to gather, all of it battlefield medicine disguised as village craft. Why did she insist on tactical training? She told herself it was for their protection, but protection from what? Random bandits? Wild animals? No. Protection from the inevitable moment when their heritage would surface and enemies would come calling. Every choice, she breathes, the pattern becoming clear. Every single choice. The sword techniques weren't games. They were systematic preparation for royal bodyguards. The lessons in reading terrain weren't nature walks. They were reconnaissance training. The emphasis on loyalty, on questioning orders, on thinking 3 moves ahead, all of it designed to create not just warriors, but leaders capable of surviving in a world of constant betrayal. She raised them to be exactly what they were born to be, princes who could reclaim their throne. "You magnificent, manipulative witch," Ragnar says softly, and she realizes he's followed her chain of reasoning. "Even in treason you thought like a strategist." The twins look between them, sensing undercurrents they don't yet understand. But Astrid sees it now with crystal clarity, the elaborate deception she practiced not just on them but on herself, the comfortable lie that she acted from pure maternal love, when in truth she was executing the most complex strategy of her career. "You never meant to keep us safe forever," Eirik says, his tactical mind beginning to grasp the scope of her planning. "You meant to prepare us. For this," Bjorn adds, gesturing at the longship, at Ragnar, at the moment of revelation they now inhabit. "For exactly this." Astrid nods slowly, feeling pieces of herself she thought long buried stirring back to life. The Iron Maiden who could read a battle's flow like runes carved in stone, who planned campaigns 3 seasons in advance, who never made a move without considering its implications, 5 steps down the chain of consequences. "I told myself I was protecting you from your heritage," she admits. "But what I actually did was prepare you to claim it on your own terms, with skills your enemies won't expect and loyalty they can't corrupt." The revelation transforms everything. 7 years of apparent motherly devotion reveal themselves as the most elaborate military training program ever conceived. Every bedtime story about strategy and honor, every patient correction of stance or grip, every lesson in reading people's intentions, all of it preparation for the moment when they would need to navigate the treacherous waters of royal politics. The question becomes, Ragnar says, his pale eyes fixed on her with something approaching respect, whether you planned this as their ultimate protection or their perfect revenge. Astrid meets his gaze steadily, feeling the familiar cold calculation settling over her thoughts like armor. The weight of maternal love doesn't disappear, but it no longer dominates her thinking. She sees the board clearly now. All the pieces, all the possible moves, all the ways this game could end. Both, she says simply. The twins exchange glances, and for the first time since the revelations began, she sees something other than betrayal in their faces. They're beginning to understand that they weren't just loved, they were crafted, shaped with surgical precision into weapons capable of not just survival but conquest. The Iron Maiden has awakened, and her greatest masterpiece stands before her, ready to choose its own path to power. The transformation ripples outward from that single word like stones cast into still water. Both. Protection and revenge, love and calculation, maternal devotion and strategic brilliance, all of it converging in this moment of crystalline clarity. Astrid feels the familiar weight of command settling across her shoulders like a war cloak. 7 years of playing the gentle healer, the devoted mother, the woman haunted by past sins, all of it falls away to reveal what she truly is, what she always was, even in her deepest moments of self-deception. You understand now, she says, her voice carrying new authority. Not the pleading tone of a woman begging forgiveness, but the measured cadence of a general addressing her troops. Everything that happened today was inevitable. Ragnar's arrival, his recognition, this confrontation, all of it predictable variables in an equation I began solving the night I pulled you from the flames. Bjorn shifts his grip on the sax, but his movement no longer speaks of betrayal. Instead, she recognizes the subtle adjustment of a warrior reassessing his position on a battlefield that has suddenly shifted in his favor. You knew he would come. Eventually, someone would always come. Astrid begins to pace the deck with renewed purpose, her mind cataloging resources and possibilities. Your bloodline carries too much power to remain hidden forever. The question was never whether you would be discovered, but whether you would be ready when discovery came. Eric watches her transformation with calculating eyes. And are we ready? The question hangs between them, loaded with implications that extend far beyond this single confrontation. Ragnar's warriors shift restlessly, sensing the change in dynamic but uncertain of its meaning. Their chieftain, however, observes with the sharp attention of a predator recognizing another apex hunter. Look around you, Astrid instructs, gesturing toward the assembled forces. What do you see? The twins follow her direction, and she watches them apply 7 years of tactical instruction to their current situation. Their gazes sweep across the deck with systematic precision, counting weapons, assessing angles of attack, identifying potential allies and certain enemies. 15 warriors, Bjorn reports quietly, well-armed, experienced. Loyalty to Ragnar appears absolute. Escape routes limited, Eric adds. Swimming distance to shore manageable but vulnerable. Village offers potential defensive positions but minimal strategic value. Ragnar himself presents the greatest threat and the greatest opportunity, they conclude together, their voices falling into the synchronized rhythm that marks their deepest tactical discussions. Astrid nods approvingly. And what does that assessment tell you about your options? That we have more than it initially appeared, Eirik says slowly. If everything you've revealed is true, about our heritage, about your planning, about the years of preparation, then this isn't a crisis. It's the culmination of a strategy we've been unconsciously implementing our entire lives. Ragnar barks a laugh, but his amusement carries an edge of wariness. You speak of strategy, boy, but you're still outnumbered and outgunned. Whatever grand plans your guardian may have harbored, the reality remains simple. You're 13 years old with no allies, no army, and no throne to claim. No, Astrid agrees, feeling the pieces align in her mind with satisfying precision. But they have something far more valuable: legitimacy no one can question, and skills no one expects. You came here hunting for lost princes to eliminate or exploit. Instead, you found weapons perfectly crafted for the current political landscape. She turns to face Ragnar directly, the Iron Maiden emerging fully from behind 7 years of careful disguise. Tell me, old friend, how goes the alliance these days? Still united in purpose? Still sharing spoils equally among all partners? The slight tightening around Ragnar's eyes confirms her suspicions. Political alliances built on conquest rarely survive the transition to governance. Without external enemies to unite against, former allies inevitably turn on each other as they compete for limited resources and ultimate authority. The northern kingdoms grow restless, she continues, reading the confirmation in his posture. Territory disputes, succession questions, trade disagreements, all the predictable fractures that emerge when warriors try to become administrators. Your point? Ragnar demands, but his defensive tone reveals how accurately she's assessed the situation. My point is that two legitimate heirs with unquestionable bloodlines and unexpected capabilities represent exactly the kind of stabilizing force that restless kingdoms crave. Not as conquerors, they lack the numbers for that, but as symbols of continuity and lawful authority. The twins absorb this analysis with growing understanding. She watches them recognize the true scope of their strategic position, not as powerless refugees, but as precisely the resource that every faction in the fragmenting alliance desperately needs to legitimize their own authority. You're proposing an alliance, Bjorn observes. I'm proposing inevitability, Astrid corrects. The question isn't whether you'll reclaim power, but how you'll choose to wield it when the time comes. She meets Ragnar's gaze with cold confidence, and whether old alliances can evolve into new partnerships or whether they'll crumble under the weight of their own contradictions. The game has begun in earnest, and for the first time in 7 years, Astrid feels truly alive. The words hang in the salt air between them, sharp as drawn steel. Ragnar's weathered features shift through calculations of his own, weighing the implications of what Astrid has laid before him. She can see the moment when his tactical mind fully grasps the scope of her proposal. Not surrender or defiance, but transformation of the entire conflict into something far more complex. You would have me believe, he says slowly, that 7 years of exile and deception were actually preparation for negotiation? I'd have you believe, Astrid replies, stepping closer with the confidence of a woman who has just remembered her own power, that 7 years of careful cultivation have produced exactly what your fragmenting alliance needs to survive the next decade. The twins watch this exchange with growing understanding. She sees them recognize the shift from personal confrontation to political maneuvering, from family drama to the kind of strategic positioning that determines the fate of kingdoms. Their amber eyes reflect not just their grandfather's legendary intellect, but something newer, the cold pragmatism she has spent years nurturing without fully acknowledging her purpose. The alliance fears legitimacy challenges, Eirik observes, his young voice carrying disturbing authority. That's why bloodline heirs are typically eliminated rather than exiled. We represent a constant threat to their narrative of rightful conquest. But elimination requires secrecy, Bjorn adds, following the logic to its inevitable conclusion. Public executions of legitimate princes create martyrs and rallying points for opposition. Our deaths would need to appear accidental or be conducted in absolute privacy. Astrid feels fierce pride at their analysis, even as the maternal part of her recoils at hearing her sons discuss their own potential murders with such clinical detachment. She has raised them well, perhaps too well, which brings us to the fundamental problem with your current position, she tells Ragnar. You came here planning to resolve a security threat quietly. Instead, You've discovered a political opportunity that cannot be harvested through violence. Ragnar's pale eyes narrow. Explain. Kill them now, and you eliminate two potential claimants to power you've already destabilized through conquest, but you also lose the only legitimate heirs capable of providing stability to the territories you're struggling to control. Astrid begins pacing again, her mind falling into the familiar rhythm of strategic planning. Keep them alive as prisoners, and you create exactly the kind of secret that destroys alliances when it inevitably comes to light. But acknowledge them publicly, Eric continues, understanding flooding his features, and you transform conquest into restoration, illegal seizure into legitimate succession. With the backing of the very alliance that destroyed their grandfather's regime, Bjorn finishes, his voice carrying wonderment at the elegant complexity of the gambit. The silence that follows is pregnant with possibility. Astrid watches Ragnar process the full implications of her proposal, sees him recognize that she has managed to corner him using nothing more than 7 years of patient preparation and the political realities he helped create. You're asking me to legitimize the very bloodline I spent years eliminating, he says finally. I'm offering you the chance to complete your conquest through legal succession rather than military occupation, she corrects. The twins rule under alliance guidance, bringing stability to restless territories while ensuring your faction's continued influence. Opposition factions lose their primary rallying point, trade relationships stabilize, and everyone profits from peace rather than bleeding resources through constant conflict. And you? Ragnar asks, genuine curiosity coloring his tone. What becomes of the Iron Maiden in this grand strategy? The question strikes deeper than she expected. For 7 years, she has been nothing more than Astrid the healer, devoted mother to 2 orphaned boys. The woman who helped plan the perfect siege, who could read battlefield tactics like poetry, who commanded respect through brilliant ruthlessness. That woman disappeared into domesticity and carefully cultivated guilt. She feels that woman stirring now, drawn back to the surface by the familiar thrill of high-stakes maneuvering, the part of her that thrived on impossible situations and elegant solutions to complex problems. I become what I always was, she says quietly, their advisor, their strategist, their guarantee that they will never again be vulnerable to the kind of betrayal that destroyed their family. The commitment settles into her bones like armor clicking into place. No more hiding behind maternal guilt or pretended helplessness. No more lying to herself about her motivations or capabilities. Whatever comes next, she will face it as the Iron Maiden, the woman who sees 3 moves ahead and never enters a battle she cannot win. The final confrontation you've been building toward, she tells Ragnar, meeting his gaze with renewed steel, is not between you and them. It's between the alliance you helped forge and the future it must choose. Continued fracturing through competition or renewed strength through legitimized succession. The game has evolved beyond personal vengeance or family secrets. The stakes now encompass kingdoms, trade routes, the delicate balance of power across the northern seas. And Astrid intends to win it all. Ragnar's expression shifts like storm clouds gathering over the fjord. For a heartbeat, Astrid sees the exact moment when her carefully constructed strategy collides with the reality of what she's proposing, not just political maneuvering, but a complete reconstruction of 7 years of carefully maintained power structures. Win it all, he repeats, his voice carrying dangerous amusement. Do you hear yourself, Iron Maiden? You speak as though you hold cards worth playing when you stand on my ship, surrounded by my warriors, with 2 boys whose lives hang on my whim. The twins tense, hands drifting toward their weapons, but Astrid raises a subtle hand to still them. This is the moment she has been building toward, not through conscious planning, but through every choice made over 7 years of preparation. Every lesson in patience, every demonstration of thinking beyond immediate threats, every careful cultivation of skills they would need for exactly this confrontation. Your warriors, she says calmly, whose loyalty depends on continued success. Your ship, which brought you here chasing rumors instead of managing the territorial disputes fragmenting your alliance. Your whim, which must now account for political realities extending far beyond this deck. She steps forward, close enough that the conversation becomes intimate, personal, a discussion between equals rather than captor and prisoner. Tell me, Ragnar, when did you last receive tribute from the southern territories? When did the coastal jarls last acknowledge your authority without question? When did you last sleep soundly, knowing your allies would remain allies come morning? Each question lands like a precisely aimed arrow. She watches him recognize that her 7 years of apparent exile have not been spent in ignorance of the larger political landscape. A healer travels between villages, hears news from traders, observes the subtle signs of shifting loyalties and growing instability. The alliance is dying, Eric observes with clinical detachment that would be disturbing in any other 13-year-old, not from external threats, but from the inevitable decay that consumes all structures built on conquest rather than consent. Which means this confrontation represents far more than family drama, Bjorn adds, his amber eyes reflecting understanding that spans far beyond his years. It's a test of whether evolution is possible or whether collapse is inevitable. Ragnar turns his attention to the twins with new respect and new wariness. You speak like seasoned advisors, not village children. They speak, Astrid interjects, like princes who have been systematically prepared for the responsibilities they were born to inherit. Every story I told them contained lessons in statecraft. Every game we played developed strategic thinking. Every skill they learned serves dual purposes, survival and governance. The admission transforms the entire dynamic on the deck. Ragnar's warriors shift uneasily, beginning to understand that they face not refugees but carefully crafted weapons of political warfare. The twins stand straighter, finally grasping the full scope of their preparation and the true nature of their strategic position. 7 years, Ragnar muses, of the most elaborate deception ever conceived. You let me believe I was hunting scattered remnants of a defeated bloodline, when in truth you were forging the very instruments that could legitimize everything I've built or destroy it utterly. The choice of which outcome manifests, Astrid says, feeling the familiar cold clarity of absolute commitment settling over her thoughts, rests entirely with how you respond to what I'm offering. She gestures toward the shore, where Ravenshollow continues its daily routines, unaware that the conversation taking place on the anchored longship will determine whether their children grow up in an age of stability or watch kingdoms tear themselves apart through endless succession wars. This is your final test, Ragnar Bloodaxe. Not of strength, your reputation in that regard remains unquestioned. Not of tactical brilliance, your victories speak for themselves, but of vision, of the ability to see beyond conquest toward the kind of legacy that survives generations rather than collapsing the moment its architect dies. The words carry weight beyond their immediate meaning. She has just challenged him not merely as a rival strategist, but as someone whose understanding of power extends beyond the immediate gratification of dominance. The Iron Maiden has emerged fully, and she brings with her 7 years of patient planning and absolute certainty of purpose. The boy's heritage cannot remain secret indefinitely, she continues, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has already calculated every possible outcome. Too many people possess fragments of knowledge. Too many political factions benefit from chaos to allow stability to persist unchallenged. The question becomes whether their revelation serves your alliance or destroys it. Eric and Bjorn exchange glances, and in that moment of silent communication, Astrid sees the final confirmation that her strategy has succeeded beyond her wildest expectations. They are not merely prepared for whatever comes next, they are eager for it. 7 years of careful cultivation have produced exactly what she intended, legitimate heirs who possess both the skills to navigate treacherous political waters and the hunger to reclaim what was stolen from their bloodline. The game is no longer about survival. It has become about conquest of an entirely different kind, the conquest of legitimacy itself. Ragnar's weathered hand moves to his sword hilt, not drawing but claiming the comfort of cold iron as he processes the magnitude of what Astrid has orchestrated. The gesture sends ripples of tension through his warriors, who shift into loose combat formations without conscious thought. "You speak of conquest and legitimacy," he says, his voice carrying the dangerous quiet that precedes violence. "But you've made one fatal miscalculation, Iron Maiden. You assume I need legitimacy more than I need the certainty that comes with eliminating threats." The wind across the fjord picks up, setting the longship's rigging to singing a low, ominous note. Astrid feels the familiar ice-cold clarity that has guided her through every crucial battle of her life, the absolute focus that transforms complex situations into simple equations of survival and victory. "Then draw your blade," she says, her voice carrying across the deck with unmistakable command. "End this conversation the same way you ended my first family. But understand that you'll be choosing the collapse of everything you've built over the chance to secure it permanently." The challenge hangs in the salt air like a thrown gauntlet. Every warrior on deck understands they have just witnessed the moment when political maneuvering transforms into mortal confrontation. The twins tense, their hands finding their weapons with fluid precision that speaks to 7 years of relentless training. But Ragnar doesn't draw. Instead, he laughs, a sound like breaking ice that contains equal measures of admiration and deadly intent. "Do you know what I see when I look at you now?" he asks, circling her with predatory grace. Not the broken woman who knelt in burning ruins 7 years ago, not the village healer who tended my men's wounds with shaking hands. I see the strategist who convinced me to approach Ironhold through the harbor instead of the mountain pass, the decision that made victory possible. Each word strikes like a physical blow. Astrid feels the twins' shock ripple through the air behind her, realizes that, in all her careful revelations, she never admitted the deepest betrayal of all. Not just that she participated in their family's destruction, but that she authored the strategy that made it inevitable. "Yes," she says, refusing to flinch from the truth that has eaten at her soul for 7 years. "I planned the attack that killed your grandfather. Every detail, every weakness exploited, every defense overcome. My mind, my strategy, my betrayal." Eirik's sharp intake of breath cuts through the wind. Bjorn's hand tightens on his sword hilt until his knuckles show white. She has just confessed to being not merely complicit in their family's destruction, but instrumental in it. "And yet," she continues, turning to face them with the full weight of 7 years, accumulated guilt and determination, "I also ensured that you survived. I planned that attack knowing I would save you from it. I betrayed your grandfather to preserve your future." The contradiction hangs between them like a chasm, impossible to cross, impossible to ignore. How does one reconcile love with betrayal, salvation with destruction, the woman who murdered their family with the mother who raised them? That, Ragnar observes with vicious satisfaction, is the real confrontation here. Not between us, Iron Maiden, but between you and the boys whose lives you've shaped through the most elaborate lie ever constructed. The twins stand frozen, amber eyes reflecting the kind of devastation that shapes character forever. Astrid sees them struggling to reconcile every moment of love, every lesson in honor, every demonstration of fierce protectiveness, with the knowledge that it all emerged from the deepest betrayal imaginable. "Choose," she tells them, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she's asking. "Judge me by the woman who planned your family's destruction, or by the mother who has spent 7 years ensuring you could reclaim everything that was stolen." "Both," Eirik says finally, his young voice carrying new weight. "You're both women. The question isn't which is real, it's which one stands before us now." Bjorn nods slowly, understanding flooding his features. The strategist who could plan our grandfather's defeat could certainly plan our restoration. The guilt that drove you to save us drives you still to see us succeed. Their acceptance hits harder than condemnation would have. They have chosen to judge her not by her past betrayals, but by her demonstrated commitment to their future. It's forgiveness she doesn't deserve and cannot fully accept, but which transforms everything nonetheless. Ragnar watches this exchange with growing unease, recognizing that his psychological warfare has strengthened rather than fractured their unity. Touching, he snarls, but ultimately irrelevant. You're still outnumbered, outgunned, and completely at my mercy. No, Astrid says, feeling the pieces of her longest game finally clicking into place. We're exactly where I planned for us to be, facing you with the truth instead of hiding from it, strong enough to offer alliance instead of begging for survival. She draws her sword in one fluid motion, the blade singing as it clears the scabbard. The real confrontation begins now, Ragnar. Not just of weapons, but of futures. Choose yours. The steel in her hand feels familiar as breathing, but the weight of what comes next settles into her bones like winter cold. Ragnar's warriors spread across the deck in practiced formations, their own blades whispering from sheaths. 8 men against 3, impossible odds by any calculation except the one that matters most. You think to threaten me on my own ship? Ragnar's voice carries genuine amusement. The Iron Maiden's legendary strategic mind appears to have dulled during 7 years of domestic tranquility. No, Astrid says, her eyes tracking the positioning of his men while her mind calculates distances, angles, the precise choreography of what must unfold. It's simply focused on a different kind of victory. She feels rather than sees the twins moving into position behind her, not the protective stance she taught them as children, but the fluid combat formation they've drilled until it became instinct. They understand, as she raised them to understand, that some battles cannot be won through clever words or political maneuvering. The first warrior moves with the deadly speed that marks Ragnar's elite guard. Astrid meets his strike with a parry that sends shockwaves up both their arms, then flows into a riposte that opens his throat to the salt wind. 7 years of healing hands remember their older skills, the precise angles required to end lives efficiently. But even as her blade finds its mark, she sees the terrible mathematics of their situation. For every man they drop, 2 more press forward. The twins fight with the skill she drilled into them, but 13-year-old muscles tire faster than seasoned warriors. Eirik's left shoulder already shows crimson where a blade found its mark. Bjorn favors his right leg, though she cannot see when he took the wound. They are winning individual exchanges while losing the larger battle, exactly the scenario she spent years teaching them to recognize and avoid. Enough! Ragnar's bellow freezes every combatant on the deck. His own blade remains sheathed, his pale eyes reflecting cold calculation rather than bloodlust. This proves nothing except that you trained them well before leading them to slaughter. The momentary pause allows Astrid to grasp what her tactical mind has been trying to communicate through the fog of combat. This is not the battle that matters, it's the distraction that obscures the real confrontation. Ragnar could have overwhelmed them through sheer numbers at any moment. Instead, he's allowing the fight to continue because it serves his larger purpose. You're testing them, she realizes, lowering her blade slightly. Not trying to kill them, evaluating them. The Iron Maiden's reputation did not exaggerate her perception, Ragnar acknowledges. Yes, I wanted to see what 7 years of your instruction produced, whether they possess the steel necessary for the roles you've been preparing them to claim. The twins remain in combat stance, their breathing controlled despite the intensity of the fight. But their amber eyes reflect understanding of the deeper game being played around them, the recognition that their performance in battle serves as audition for something far more significant than survival. And your conclusion? Eirik asks, his voice steady despite the blood seeping through his tunic. That you fight like princes who understand the cost of weakness, Ragnar replies. But fighting prowess alone does not make kings. The true test lies not in what you're willing to kill for, but what you're willing to sacrifice. The words strike Astrid like physical blows. She sees now the shape of the trap she walked into so confidently, not a military confrontation or political negotiation, but something far more devastating. Ragnar has orchestrated this entire encounter to force the choice she has been avoiding for 7 years. "You want them to choose," she breathes, the full magnitude of his strategy finally clear. Not between life and death, but between their mother and their destiny. "The heirs of Ironhold cannot serve two loyalties," Ragnar confirms, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "They can remain Astrid's beloved boys, safe in their village anonymity, protected by the woman who saved them from their grandfather's fate. Or they can become the princes you've been preparing them to be. But that transformation requires leaving their childhood behind, permanently." The silence that follows contains the sound of 7 years of careful preparation colliding with the reality of what success actually costs. Astrid feels the twins' eyes upon her, sees them beginning to understand that their mother's greatest gift to them might require accepting her permanent exile from their lives. "The Alliance will accept them," Ragnar continues, "but not with the Iron Maiden as their advisor. Too many remember her betrayals, too many question loyalties that change with circumstance. Their legitimacy requires distance from the woman who shaped them, publicly, completely, forever." The choice crystallizes with brutal clarity. Everything she planned, everything she sacrificed, everything she built across 7 years of patient dedication, success means losing it all. Victory requires surrendering the only thing that has given her life meaning since the night she knelt in burning ruins and chose love over loyalty. Her son's future or her place in it. Never both. The words hang in the salt air like a death sentence dressed as opportunity. Astrid feels the deck beneath her feet, solid Norwegian oak that suddenly seems as unstable as shifting sand. 7 years of careful planning, of patient preparation, of love given freely despite the guilt that gnawed at her soul. All of it culminating in this moment of impossible choice. She looks at the twins, sees the understanding dawning in their amber eyes. They comprehend now what she has always known but never allowed herself to fully acknowledge, that raising them to reclaim their birthright meant preparing them to leave her behind. "How long?" Bjorn asks quietly, his young voice carrying weight beyond his years. "How long have you known it would end this way?" The question cuts deeper than any blade. Astrid sheathes her sword with deliberate precision, buying time to find words for a truth she has never spoken aloud. "Since the night I pulled you from the burning hall, I knew that success would require sacrifice. I simply chose not to examine what that sacrifice would be." Eirik presses a hand to his wounded shoulder, crimson seeping between his fingers, but his gaze never wavers from her face. "You planned for every contingency except the one where we refuse." "Because that contingency leads to your deaths," she replies with brutal honesty. "Ragnar's offer is generous beyond anything I dared hope for. He could have simply eliminated you the moment he recognized your heritage. Instead, he's providing a path to legitimacy at a price." Ragnar watches this exchange with predatory patience, understanding that the most devastating battles are fought not with steel, but with love turned against itself. His warriors lower their weapons but maintain position, creating a circle of witnesses to whatever choice emerges from this crucible. The price, Ragnar clarifies with clinical precision, is not merely separation. The alliance requires absolute certainty that the Iron Maiden's influence over the heirs of Ironhold has ended permanently. There can be no secret communications, no coded messages, no possibility of hidden loyalties undermining their position. The full weight of forever settles over them like a burial shroud, not temporary exile or strategic distance, but complete severance from the only family any of them have known. Astrid feels something breaking inside her chest, not her heart, which shattered years ago amid burning timbers and political betrayal, but her hope, the fragile belief that redemption might come without requiring the ultimate sacrifice. "And if we refuse?" Bjorn's hand finds his sword hilt again, though whether for comfort or threat remains unclear. "Then you remain village boys under my protection. Ragnar says with surprising gentleness. I will not harm those who choose obscurity over ambition. But you forfeit any claim to your heritage, any chance to restore what was lost. The bloodline of Ironhold dies with your grandfather, and the alliance continues without the legitimacy your acceptance would provide. The twins exchange one of their wordless communications, a conversation conducted in glances and subtle gestures that speaks to years of shared experience. Astrid watches, recognizing the moment when her children, for they are her children, regardless of blood, transform into the leaders she raised them to become. We understand the choice, Eric says finally. But you misunderstand us if you think we'll abandon our mother for political convenience. The woman who saved us, Bjorn adds, who raised us, who taught us everything that makes us worthy of the heritage we're being offered to reclaim. That woman doesn't become disposable the moment her strategy succeeds. Their loyalty hits Astrid like a physical blow. After everything she has confessed, the betrayals, the manipulation, the years of elaborate deception, they still claim her as family, still choose her over the destiny she spent 7 years preparing them to embrace. You cannot, she whispers, understanding finally that love can be as devastating as any weapon. You cannot sacrifice your future for my redemption. Watch us, they say in unison, and she hears in their voices the echo of every bedtime story, every shared meal, every moment of ordinary family life that somehow bloomed in the shadow of extraordinary circumstances. Ragnar's expression shifts, calculation giving way to something approaching respect. Loyalty is admirable in children. In rulers, it can prove fatal. The alliance will not accept divided loyalties, regardless of their emotional justification. Then, perhaps, Astrid says, feeling the pieces of one final strategy clicking into place, it's time to offer the alliance something more valuable than legitimacy through bloodline alone. She steps forward, placing herself between the twins and Ragnar's waiting warriors. The movement carries symbolic weight that everyone present understands, the mother's final act of protection transforming into something else entirely. I have one more offer to make, she continues, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has calculated every angle and found the path through impossible circumstances. One that serves everyone's interests without requiring the destruction of everything that brought us to this moment. The words carry promise and threat in equal measure, suggesting that the Iron Maiden's legendary strategic mind has found one last gambit to play in a game where every other piece seems destined for sacrifice. The salt wind carries the weight of 7 years as Astrid draws herself to her full height, feeling the Iron Maiden's mantle settle around her shoulders one final time. Not the broken woman who knelt in ashes, nor the gentle healer who bandaged scraped knees, but something new, forged from both identities in the crucible of impossible love. You speak of divided loyalties, she says to Ragnar, her voice carrying across the deck with commanding authority. But what if the alliance gained not just legitimate heirs, but the strategic mind that made their restoration possible? What if instead of exile, you offered integration? Ragnar's pale eyes narrow, calculating this unexpected shift in the game's parameters. The Iron Maiden seeks to negotiate her way back into power through maternal manipulation? No, the word rings with finality that surprises even Astrid. The Iron Maiden died 7 years ago in the ruins of Ironhold. I offer something far more valuable, a mother's wisdom tempered by a warrior's experience, bound not by old loyalties, but by new purposes. She feels the twins' attention like heat against her back, senses their understanding that this moment represents transformation rather than mere survival. Everything they've shared, every lesson taught and learned, has led to this crystallization of who she has become. I will kneel before the alliance, she continues, each word chosen with surgical precision, not as Ragnar's former strategist seeking rehabilitation, but as guardian and advisor to princes who carry the future in their blood. I will submit to whatever tests they require, accept whatever restrictions they impose, but I will not pretend that their success comes from abandoning the woman who made it possible. The silence stretches like a drawn bowstring. Ragnar studies her with the intensity of a predator recognizing unexpected prey, while his warriors shift restlessly, understanding that the terms of engagement have fundamentally changed. "You ask the Alliance to trust the architect of their enemy's destruction," he says finally. "I ask them to recognize that the architect of destruction learned to build something better." Astrid's hand finds Eric's uninjured shoulder, drawing strength from the solid warmth of the boy who chose loyalty over ambition. "7 years of raising these boys taught me what my years of warfare never could, that true victory isn't conquering your enemies, but creating a future worth the cost of achieving it." Bjorn steps forward, his young face carrying authority beyond his years. The heirs of Ironhold offer terms of their own. "We will join the Alliance, claim our heritage, fulfill the destiny our mother prepared us for. But we do so as the sons of Astrid Ironsdottir, not as ashamed survivors grateful for scraps of legitimacy." "The woman who saved us shapes our honor," Eirik adds, his amber eyes blazing with conviction. "Anyone who requires us to deny that demonstrates their own unworthiness to lead." Astrid feels tears she refuses to shed burning behind her eyes. They have become everything she dreamed and nothing she expected, leaders who understand that strength comes not from abandoning love, but from transforming it into something larger than personal need. Ragnar laughs, but the sound carries admiration rather than mockery. "You raise them well, Iron Maiden. Perhaps too well for their own good." His expression grows thoughtful. "The Alliance will not accept this easily. Too many remember old grievances, old betrayals." "Then let them test us," Astrid replies, "all of us together. Prove that redemption earned through 7 years of sacrifice carries more weight than old grudges. Show them that the future they're building is strong enough to transform even the worst of the past." The deck sways beneath them, but Astrid feels more steady than she has in years. No more lies, no more careful omissions, no more strategies built on foundation of shame, just truth offered without apology. The love that grew from betrayal, the family forged in the aftermath of destruction, the woman who learned that some things are worth more than survival. 3 months, Ragnar says finally, decision crystallizing in his voice. "I will present your proposal to the Alliance with my support. 3 months for them to test your commitment, evaluate your usefulness, determine whether the Iron Maiden's transformation is genuine or simply her most elaborate deception yet. And if they refuse, then you return to Ravenshollow," he says simply. "All of you. I will honor the bonds of family you've created, even if the Alliance cannot." Astrid nods, understanding that this represents the best outcome she could have hoped for. Not guaranteed success, but opportunity earned through honesty rather than manipulation. She looks at the twins, sees her own cautious hope reflected in their faces. They are no longer the broken remnants of a destroyed bloodline, nor the hidden princes of her careful planning. They have become something new, a family forged through choice rather than blood, strong enough to face whatever judgment awaits. The ship turns toward shore, carrying them home to Ravenshollow, where everything began and everything changed. The new beginning. 2 years have passed since Ragnar's ship carried them back to Ravenshollow, and Astrid no longer counts the days between then and now. Time has settled into rhythms she never thought possible, not the careful precision of hidden training or the desperate improvisation of survival, but something approaching peace. The morning sun catches the amber in Eric's eyes as he adjusts the leather straps of his traveling pack. At 15, he has grown tall enough to meet her gaze directly, his shoulders broad with the promise of the warrior she trained him to become. But there is gentleness in his hands as he checks Bjorn's gear, a careful attention to detail that speaks to lessons learned far from any battlefield. "The Alliance Council expects us by the new moon," Bjorn says, though his voice carries no urgency. 2 years of testing, of proving their worth through deed rather than declaration, has taught them all patience. Ragnar's message confirms they're ready to formalize the succession. Astrid nods, feeling the weight of vindication without triumph. The alliance's gradual acceptance came not through dramatic gesture, but through accumulated proof, small victories, wise counsel, the steady demonstration that the boys she raised understood leadership as service rather than dominion. Their mother's influence, once seen as contamination, had proven to be their greatest strength. "And you're certain this is what you want?" she asks, though she knows the answer. Has known it since that day on Ragnar's ship when they chose loyalty over convenience, family over politics. There's still time to change your minds, to choose the simple life here in Ravenshollow. Eric's smile carries echoes of the frightened child she once pulled from burning ruins, transformed by 7 years of love into something unbreakably strong. "You didn't raise us to hide from our responsibilities, Mama. You raised us to transform them into something worthy." The word Mama still catches her by surprise, still feels like unearned grace. For 2 years they have called her that openly, not Astrid, not guardian, but the title that acknowledges the deepest truth of their relationship. She is their mother not through blood but through choice, through the daily acts of love that built a family from the ashes of destruction. The villagers of Ravenshollow have grown accustomed to the strange truth of their existence. No longer do conversations stop when Astrid enters the market. No longer do curious eyes track her movements with speculation. The woman who arrived 7 years ago, claiming to be a simple healer, has been revealed as something far more complex. Former warrior, protective mother, architect of political restoration, and the village has embraced all of it with surprising grace. Grandmother Solveig packed extra honeycakes, Bjorn reports, hefting a bulging satchel with mock complaint. She says the Alliance Council won't feed you properly and you'll waste away to nothing if you don't eat. Astrid laughs, remembering the old woman's initial suspicion, the gradual warming that came with shared winters and small kindnesses. Solveig understands now what took Astrid years to accept, that family grows from choice and care, not bloodlines and birthrights. The entire village has become their extended clan, bound together by affection rather than obligation. The cottage that sheltered them through years of careful hiding has been prepared for their absence. Not abandoned. They will return, for this place has become home in ways Astrid never expected, but transformed into something that can wait, can hold their love even while they pursue the destiny she spent so many years preparing them to claim. "Are you ready, Mama?" Eirik asks, shouldering his pack with practiced ease. Astrid looks around the small rooms that contain the most important years of her life, sees the phantom echoes of boys who grew into young men while learning to balance legacy with love, the table where they shared countless meals, the fireplace where she told stories that became history lessons, the corner where weapons practice gradually became family tradition. Every surface holds memory of the extraordinary life they built from impossible circumstances. "I'm ready," she says, and discovers she means it. They walk together toward the village center, where horses wait to carry them toward whatever future awaits. The path winds between cottages where friends wave farewell, past gardens they helped plant, through the landscape that taught them all the difference between hiding and healing. Astrid feels the weight of transformation in her bones, understands finally that redemption was never about escaping the past, but about learning to carry it without shame. She is still the Iron Maiden who helped orchestrate a massacre. She is also the mother who chose love over loyalty, who built a family from the ruins of her greatest betrayal. Both truths exist without contradiction, woven together into something stronger than either could be alone. The horses carry them toward the horizon, toward alliance councils and formal ceremonies, toward the moment when hidden princes become acknowledged heirs. But they carry something else as well, the certainty that whatever titles await, whatever responsibilities beckon, the bonds forged in 7 years of ordinary love are strong enough to survive any transformation. Behind them, Ravenshollow settles into its morning rhythms. Ahead, the future unfolds with all its promise and peril. Between past and possibility, a family rides together toward home.